Alice Sylvester was my mother. She had a very long and at times a very hard life. She passed last Monday, 13 days short of what would have been her 93rd birthday. My mother was born Alice Kornreich on January 31st, 1923, to a Jewish Hungarian family in Munkács, which was then part of Czechoslovakia. And due to shifting borders over the centuries, the town belonged to Hungary until 1920, to Czechoslovakia during 1920 through 1938, and again Hungary in 1938 through 45, and it's now part of the Ukraine. My mother was born to Leos, a builder and architect, and Lily Kornreich. They had a younger brother, Andy. She had a younger brother, Andy. Unfortunately, her happy childhood was brutally disrupted. On March 20th, 1944, the Nazis came to Munkács. 2 months later, on May 30th, 1944, the city was declared Jundere, free of Jews following ghettoization and a series of deportations to Auschwitz. The vast majority of Jews in Munkács were murdered. My mother and the rest of her family were deported to Auschwitz. Eventually, my mother and her mother, my grandmother, were ordered to the gas chambers. But miraculously, there was a malfunction on that day in releasing the Zyklon B lethal gas. It was because of that malfunction that we are all here today, and I'm standing before you. When I was growing up, my mother never spoke about her experience in the death camps. She later told me that she wanted to shield me from these horrors. In the 1980s, my mother recognized her obligation to tell her story as a way to honor those who perished in the Holocaust and to help in ensuring such a horrific event never happens again. She felt she needed to respond to the denialists who outraged her. One event that provided her the motivation to speak out was a time she was driving from on Sunset Boulevard, and she came across members of the American Nazi Party protesting on a street corner by Hollywood High School. She said she was overcome with rage and had to catch herself from driving her car into them and running them over. Instead, she began volunteering with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, speaking to school children about her experience. She then became a frequent lecturer at police academies. When the Wiesenthal Center's Museum of Tolerance opened, she became a regular there, recounting her personal testimony to visitors touring the museum. She appeared on national TV talk shows such as the Sally Jesse Raphael program, providing interviews about her story. She was on the History Channel's Turn of the Century Millennium program, hosted by ABC News' Peter Jennings, which recounted major events of the 20th century. Soon after, Steven Spielberg launched his Survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation in 1994 to document stories of the Holocaust directly from survivors. The foundation became aware of her unique story. My mother was one of the first to be interviewed for the Shoah Foundation. She received a letter thanking her directly from Steven Spielberg in February of 1995. Her work with the Wiesenthal Center and the Museum of Tolerance was extremely important to her. She fully embraced the words of Nobel laureate and Auschwitz survivor Elie Wiesel, who said, "The duty of the survivor is to bear testimony to what happened. You have to warn people that these things can happen, that evil can be unleashed, that race hatred, violence, idolosities, they still flourish." Thus, the best tribute to her would be to provide you with her story that she told in her own words and in her own handwriting. This is the story of her experiences during the Holocaust that she went on to tell many, many, many others. I was born in Czechoslovakia in a city called Munkács. It was on the border of Poland to one side and the Ukraine to the other. I had a beautiful, happy childhood. There were 4 of us in my immediate family. I had grandparents, many, many uncles, aunts, and cousins. Ours was a closely knit family. My father was a builder and architect, well-to-do and prominent man in town. He was kind, honest, and I adored him tremendously. My parents gave us all their love and spoiled us. I attended a private Hebrew school that was one of a kind in all of Europe. We had a close relationship with our classmates. We studied in each other's homes, had fun, went on outings together, and had a great fondness for our teachers. I had many Czech and Hungarian non-Jewish friends. Life during the reign of the Czech government was very prosperous and democratic. In 1939, the Hungarians occupied our part of Czechoslovakia. The Czechs fled overnight. Gradually, things started to change from bad to worse. The school system changed. The Jewish teachers were fired and replaced by Gentile Hungarians. A few days later, all the Jews that were in business or were intellectuals had to take in Jewish Gentile partners who later took over the entire business. My father had to hire a Hungarian person who then became his boss. Our Gentile friends and neighbors suddenly didn't know us. They wouldn't associate with Jews. The next law that was issued stated that Jews must wear the yellow Star of David. There was a curfew. No Jews could be seen on the streets. Before morning or after sundown, if they disobeyed the law, they were shot or disappeared. There were some exceptions to those rules. For example, those that were married to Gentiles or were heroes of World War I. My father was a recipient of a gold medal, so as a hero, his immediate family were exempt from certain regulations. We didn't have to wear the Star of David. It was a time of great fear. We anticipated and wondered what new laws would follow. We could listen only to the propaganda news on radio that was broadcast by the Hungarians. A few days later, they issued new laws. All Jews wearing the yellow star must leave their homes within hours and move into the ghetto. My father and his immediate family, because of his exemption, remained at home. The ghetto was established out of town, mostly in brick factories. There was no toilet or cooking facilities and no roof. They put hundreds of people in one hut with no beds to sleep in. They slept on the floors. Not wearing the yellow star, my family can go in and out of the ghetto. The soldiers guarding the place didn't know that we were Jews. We went in several times daily to take food for our relatives, but it was never enough. My brother used to watch for trucks that carried people out of the ghetto, to be shipped out and never to be seen again. He told the truck driver that he was working for the government, out of uniform, but had orders to take these people to work in the fields. My brother was able to take charge of the Jews and had them take off their stars. He put them on trains going to Budapest. He was able to save a few, but never enough. My father had a very close friend who also was exempt from laws applying to Jews. I remember one day we were at home. Judith, who was 8 years old, the daughter of this friend, came running towards our door with a note in her hand. She was shaking and crying bitterly. I grabbed the note from her, which was written by her father. It read, "Dear Judith, please forgive us, but Mother and I can't endure this catastrophe any longer, so we will end our lives. You go to my friend, and he will take care of you." My brother jumped on his bicycle and rode to their house. In the attic, he found Judith's parents hanging from the ceiling. He cut the cords. The mother was dead, but the father was still alive. He took him to the hospital for a few days, and when he felt better, he was sent home, and Judith went back to her father. The next day, they were taken away. Later, when we were taken to Auschwitz, we found out that Judith and her father were taken there. In 1944, the German army marched into our town and took over. We were very scared. We hardly went outside. Mostly we stayed indoors. One day our front door was kicked in, and 6 German soldiers with guns pointing at us ordered that we take off all our jewelry we had on and hand it over to them. Without taking any belongings with us, and with guns at our backs, we marched out into the streets. Outside, they pushed us into a truck that was full of people and drove us to the railroad station. Before we were ordered to board the cattle trains, they selected 3 men, among them my father. The German soldiers then started to beat them savagely with their guns. When it was over, I looked at my father and saw pain, hurt, and a humiliation in his eyes. I just wanted to die. Then they ordered us into the cattle trains. The trains were already full, mostly with those that were not in the ghetto. We were the first shipment from our town to Auschwitz. We traveled 4 days and 3 nights. There was no food, water, or toilet facilities. A terrible odor was constant. We heard crying and moaning from the children, elderly and sick at all times. Many died during the trip, but never did the train stop and take them off. During the night, they stopped the train, opened the doors, and let in smoke. We heard a lot of shooting. Each night, we were sure that either they will shoot us or the smoke will kill us. But after they closed the doors, the train moved on. Finally, the train stopped and we arrived at Auschwitz. The doors swung open and we were ordered to get out. The first thing we saw were Nazi soldiers with guns, big dogs, and lots of smoke. We had no idea what the smoke meant or where it came from. Only a few days later did we learn from inmates who worked at the gas chambers and ovens that after they gassed our people, they shoved them into ovens to be burned. Many times, a son had to shove his father, mother, and other relatives into the ovens. Other times, the father was forced to put his family in the ovens. When we got off the train, they started to separate the men from the women. When my father's friend, whom my brother saved by cutting the cord, saw my father, he told him to get word immediately to Mother and me that when they ask our ages, Mother should say that she is 10 years younger and I a few years older. My brother ran over to us and gave us Father's message. That was the last time we heard from my father. He was killed 1 hour before the English liberated his camps. We couldn't understand the meaning of the message. Little did we know that later it will save Mother's life. Then they separated the elderly women, children, women who wouldn't let go of their children, the sick, and others. They were sent straight to the gas chambers. The remaining ones, like us, they marched to the showers first. We were ordered to strip naked, and then they shaved our heads. I was standing there next to my mother. When I looked at her, I didn't recognize her. Within minutes, we were unrecognizable. We had lost our dignity and our identity. They disinfected us and threw some rags for us to put on, and then marched us to the barracks. The barracks had several triple decks, wooden squares. Those were our living quarters. It was so tight that It was not only impossible to lie down, but one was unable to stretch a leg or arm. Our daily food ration was a small bowl of lukewarm water with green leaves floating in it. At night, we were given a small slice of stale black bread. Each morning at 5 a.m., we had to line up naked outside in the yard and be counted. And each morning that infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele appeared and examined each body. If he found a person not young enough or healthy, he would wave his hand and those people would be taken off to the gas chamber. We never saw those people again. It must be emphasized that it was Mengele and those Germans in charge who said, "These go to the gas chamber." One day Dr. Mengele stopped in front of my mother and asked, "How old are you?" Remembering Father's message, she replied, "I'm 37 years old." Mengele said, "If you are lying, we will chop off your head." For 15 minutes, he interrogated her about her age while I was shaking and praying he shouldn't trip her up. Finally, he walked on to the next person, and my mother was saved. We stayed 6 weeks in Auschwitz. One day, the entire barrack was ordered to go to the showers. As we were marching, some of the prisoners who had been there for years and worked at the gas chambers asked us to give them our bread rations. They told us they were taking us to be gassed. Then the Germans in charge made us either take us into a large room. In the ceiling there were holes in which cyanide gas was let in to kill those inside. They ordered us to sit down on the cold stone floor, totally naked. There we remained for 24 hours. Because of the lack of air, we started to choke and gag, and in all probability, we passed out. By a miracle of God's will, there was a mechanical trouble, and the gas couldn't be turned on. I can state in all honesty that we were one of the very few who entered the gas chamber and came out alive. We were then given some rags to cover our body and taken to a cattle train which took us off to Stutthof, a work camp. Conditions were just as bad there, except they didn't have the gas chamber on the premises. Each morning we went through the same routine as in Auschwitz. We stood to be counted. Those found unable to work were removed and sent off to the gas chambers. We marched miles from camp where we worked. We had to load large stones into push carts to be taken up a hill to be unloaded. This was repeated throughout the day. People who dared to rest for a short time were reported. They were punished. The punishment was either by whipping with 50 lashes by an inmate. The woman so punished had to count every time she was hit. When it was over, she had to kneel with her hands up for hours. Another method used by the Nazis was to hang the person up on a tree where she was beaten, sometimes to her death. Actually hauling the stones up the hill was to build a railroad tracks which was never intended to be used. It was another form of torture and humiliation. A few months later, we were taken to another camp called Proust. During our stay in Proust, we constantly heard shooting. We realized that we must be very close to where the fighting of the war was going on. Each day, we hoped that the war would end, and so our misery would. However, the war continued, and we were again moved to some barracks. One day, those in charge started shouting, "Everybody out in 5 minutes. We are setting fire to the barrack. Those that remained inside will burn alive." I said to my mother, "I'm staying. Let me die." She grabbed me by the hand and pulled me out. 2 minutes later, we saw the barracks go up in flames. Many that couldn't make it out in 5 minutes were burned alive. As the Russian army was closing in, the Germans started our evacuation, And that's when our death march started. We marched day and night for many days. The snow was up to our knees, and all we had was a thin dress to cover our body. We were ordered to keep a certain pace. Those that lagged behind were shot on the spot. The only food we had was when the Nazi soldiers stopped to rest. We broke the frozen ground with our hands, and we dug up some frozen vegetables, or we saw a dead horse, and we cut pieces with a knife that we found on the ground. Many died during the march, some from weakness or sickness, others froze to death, or just stopped walking to be shot. They just didn't want to go on. As we marched, hundreds and hundreds of dead human bodies on the side of the road. One day, 6 of us found ourselves in the forest and no Nazi soldier in sight. We were very frightened, not knowing what happened. We started to walk, and when we noticed a German soldier was approaching us, we were sure he was going to shoot us. To our amazement, he said, "I know you are Jews. I also know that the Germans lost the war. We are finished. I'm not going to kill you. I'll save you, so I can justify my guilt and clear my conscience for the thousands of Jews I killed." He told us to walk about a mile in a certain direction where we would find a house. In the house, we would find food. He told us to eat, and when we hear shooting, we should get down on the floor, and we will survive. We didn't believe him, but had no choice. We followed what he said and went to the house. Inside, the table was set with food. We started to gorge ourselves on everything in sight when suddenly the shooting started. The bullets flew through the window. I covered my ears with my hand, and I said to my mother, "I don't want to hear how I get shot." And I passed out. The next thing I heard when I came to myself was Russians talking. I said, "If the Germans didn't kill us, now the Russians will." They started to question us in Russian, but no one understood them. And when I got a strange idea to answer them in Hebrew, it was our luck that one of them understood Hebrew. That's when he told us that we are free and that they are here to liberate us. I jumped up and threw my arms around him in joy. But in an instant, I fell back on the floor and passed out once again. The typhus and high fever that developed in my system took effect. After liberation, I experienced different ordeals and nightmares. The typhus caused me blindness for 10 days. Many other heartbreaking events took place, which would be too long to tell. In closing, I would like to state I'm not a hero by surviving, nor do I feel like one. I feel that I was just one of the lucky ones. I believe it was God's will that I survived. Maybe I was spared so I could tell my horrible and tragic experiences so the world doesn't forget that there was a Holocaust, and especially those who claim it never happened. I admit it's very painful to renew the memories of this awful happenings in my life, but I feel it is my duty in memory of my beloved father, my grandfather, my other family members, and the 6 million Jews that died, that their torture will never be told again. She told this to many, many people, and when she concluded, she also offered and urged people to commit themselves to do everything they could to ensure nothing like this ever happened to not only Jews, but to anyone, any race, any ethnicity, or any religion. Clearly, this is a commitment that needs to be done today more than ever. Her strength and determination to live and overcome the horrors inflicted is the very reason that I exist. The need to honor her survival and the ones who perished clearly influenced my life. and the work I do fighting for economic and social justice. After she came out here, after the war, she met my father. They married. They ended up divorcing in 1963. And then as a head of household, my mother went to school and became an X-ray technician, working for a prestigious Park Avenue doctor whose clients included Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong took a liking to my mother, and they became friends. Soon after moving to Los Angeles in 1972, she found work as an X-ray technician with the Beverly Hills doctor where she worked until 1977. Before passing, there was one more noteworthy deed she performed, and thanks to the rescue organization Hands and Paw, we helped my mother adopt a dog, Sammy, who was moments away from being euthanized at a shelter in Bakersfield. My mother related to the fact that both her and Sammy shared a similar fate, that of being saved moments away from death. She swore to take care of Sammy and provide him with a safe and loving home, which she did. Sammy became the center of her universe. That pledge to take care of Sammy, as well as the one to tell her story, is now passed on to her son. These last several years have been extremely difficult. For Holocaust survivors, maintaining independence is extremely important. We did everything possible, as trying as it was, to keep her in her own home with 24-hour caregivers. We were able to do this up until 2.5 months ago. I was only able to do this with the strength, determination, and rock-solid commitment from my wife, Mimi, who showed most of this challenging effort. Thank you, Mimi. I love you. I also want to thank my cousin Sharon Weiss here, who provided love and cared for my mother greatly, and was someone who we could console with. My mother is survived by her sister-in-law, Thelma Kornreich, Karen Kornreich, her niece, and her family, Sharon, and her sister, Robin Greenspad, first cousins once removed, and her family. Holocaust survivor and noted Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal said that survival is a privilege which entails obligations. And again, in the words of Elie Wiesel, I conclude, and I dedicate this pledge to my mother. He said, "I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. We must take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." And with that, I say goodbye, Mom. Rest in peace. I love you. Thank you.